Welcome. My name is Barbara Marcum. I'm the Director of Senior Resources for the City of Westland. With me today is John Rohrig, who is the owner and director of Visiting Angels in Plymouth, and also Sharon Parker, who is the office manager. And welcome today.
Thank you.
It's very important, I think. I did manage a home care company very early on in my career. I hadn't even graduated, actually, from college yet. But there were some difficulties and in areas that I found concerning. And when you and I had a conversation in my office, I felt very good about your particular company for a lot of different reasons. And so I thought maybe it would be good to talk about home care, because it's something that, you know, even if it's short term or long term, it's something that everyone should know about before a crisis occurs. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, we'll talk a little bit about opening a case and home care, what it is and how it's paid for and all of those things. So when somebody first wants to inquire about home care, Sharon, they probably talk to you and call on the phone. And so how do you go about assessing their needs and, you know, take us through that process from the time of the phone call? What can a client expect?
Okay. When they call, generally I do answer, I get those calls, and we just kind of talk about what their needs are. I let them share with what's going on in the moment, because people really need to just be heard, and I can't help them if I don't, listen to what's going on. So I ask them a lot of questions about the person, their loved one that needs the care, what's going on with them, what are they able to do right now, what are they not able to do right now, and get what's most important to them out into the conversation. And then once we go there, I can explain to them what we can do to help their mom, dad, stepmom, grandma, whoever, and just kind of help them understand. We tailor our care plans to what they particularly need. So we talk about their needs, and once they decide that they want to move forward, I go out and do an assessment visit, kind of like an intake, and again, answer any questions that they have, go over their needs, and just talk about how we can help them. Sometimes I have to help convince mom or dad that this is a good move.
So usually you get a call, not actually from the person who needs the care.
Right.
You often get it from a family
Adult
member.
Children, right, family members, cousins, anybody who's concerned about that person. We've even had neighbors call for a neighbor. So going out and just sitting down is really the best way once I get some basic information, because then they get to know me a little bit, they get to know our company a little bit. I share our background, and just help them feel at ease with who we are.
And certainly face-to-face makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
You can put a face, and rather than a phone call, I think that's much more personal.
Yeah.
So how do you handle it if, like, a neighbor calls? Do you contact the person? I'm sure they're giving you a referral. This person's not doing well on their own. So I know sometimes there are touchy situations. How do you handle that?
Absolutely. Well, it really depends. Every situation is different. So sometimes neighbors are the closest thing they have to family, and they have the ability to really help pave the way. Otherwise, if they've given me permission to call the person in need, then I can call them and explain this person was concerned and they wanted me just to share some information with you to see if there's something I can't do to help you. Our goal is always to help seniors stay in their home.
Yes.
And to be able to get home care in their own home so that they can remain independent. And so I just explain how if they let me help them a little bit, they can keep so much more of their independence than if they stay completely independent and, God forbid, fall or something like that, and then they lose so much more of their independence.
You're absolutely right there.
So a key question, I think, on the assessment form, is something that I ask the girls to put in the assessment form, is what's the most important thing to you? Because it's really about them. So we want to know. Yeah. We want to know what's the critical thing that they're really looking for. So if you phrase it that way, they're more apt to tell you. Otherwise, they're going to give you a lot of information. You're not quite sure what's the most important thing. So we ask, usually it's the oldest daughter, what's the most important thing to you?
That would be me.
So that's a critical question in our mind.
And a lot of times you're seeing, I work full time. A lot of adult children do, and often parents require more time than you can give them. So often, I don't know, do you meet with the families ever? Because sometimes it's a matter of filling in the blanks.
Right.
That I can do this and I can take mom and dad here, or I can be here on these days. But then, sometimes it's pretty simple. It's not hard, or sometimes it is. But sometimes just having that meeting where you can coordinate the family.
Absolutely.
Figure it all out.
I actually find a lot of times there's more relief for the children than they thought they were going to get, because once we talk about, we're going to help mom get a shower and help her get dressed and do the personal care and the things that she really needs to stay clean and healthy, then we add in, I'm going to have our girls vacuum and dust and do the laundry for mom and dad and change the linens and things like that. And even if you leave something out, they'll start dinner and their eyes light up like, oh, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Dinner's going to be started before I get home. So we really can help so much more than people think that we can.
Yes.
So,
I agree. I tell people a lot who talk about home care, and they say, well, I only need this or I only need that. But often they can't vacuum themselves. They can't change the peds. They can't do all of those things. And even though people consider home care a little pricey, it's pricey if they come and help you do this and that's all they do. But when they're busy, the time that they're there, and I know you're with your company, you're pretty diligent about making sure they're not texting their friends and reading their books, and that they're actually helping do more things than just provide the personal care.
Right.
So I would say this, many times we'll get a referral because a family has worked with another home care agency and they're not satisfied.
Right.
So they'll call me and they'll say, well, we're working with such and such and it hasn't worked out.
We're not happy.
And I'll always ask, well, what were the issues, if you don't mind me sharing? And it's always one of two issues. The caregiver's on their phone too much, or they're sitting around doing nothing. So those
That's why I brought that up.
Exactly.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we hit that real hard in an interview, and we also, the girls in the office, when they do the orientation for a new hire, that's really hit hard. So if,
Well, don't get ahead of me here, because that's where we're going next.
All right, good.
Okay, so when you and I had this conversation, being in home care myself and managing, I had some of my very favorite aides that I would put on more long-term care because I knew that they would take care of business. But they're not all. When you're interviewing, you often don't know. Sometimes it's kind of a transient population. How do you go about selecting who's working for your company?
Well, that's a process. So I can go through that process real
Well,
quickly.
let's talk a little bit about your background, because that impressed me a lot. Okay, so how did you decide to do this whole thing? And then we'll go about selecting people.
So I was in law enforcement most of my adult life. So I was a police officer. I was a chief of police for a little while in a small town. When I was chief of police, my dad had a massive stroke. A young guy, 73, 74 years old. Wiped out his entire left side. So I would go visit him. And on my way to visit him in the nursing home one day, I heard an ad for visiting angels. And at the end of the ad, it said, franchise opportunities available. I went, well, that's interesting. So I called, and it was interesting to me. And they invited me to an open house in Chicago, paid for it. My wife and I went, and we were just kind of hooked. And, my family was struggling with the whole home care thing, even though I have lots of siblings. I got 5 brothers and 5 sisters. 3 of them are nurses. They don't really know or understand the whole home care thing because they're in the skilled area.
That's right.
So that's how I got involved in home care, and now I've been in about 10 years now. So that's how that got started.
Well, now that you mentioned it, let's talk about the difference between skilled and unskilled. Okay. For skilled nursing care is different than home care,
we do, right.
non-medical home care. Let's talk about the difference.
Okay. So medical home care is what you would find that's paid by Medicare. And that's where somebody needs a nurse to come in and see them 2 or 3 times a week, whether that's for wound care, catheter.
After surgery.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're coming out of rehab, they go
Yeah.
home, they need something. We're called in the industry private duty, which is not, it's not medical care, it's non-medical care. So how I explain that to families is we're a stand-in for the family when the family can't be there. So we'll do all those little things that the daughter or the son might do, cooking, cleaning, laundry. The 2 big things that I think about, and Sharon's already talked about it, is vacuuming and changing the bed, because those are really hard labor-wise for people as they get older. Shoulders especially, running a vacuum. So those are the things that we look for. Light housekeeping is something we do. We don't do anything what we call heavy. We're not
Moving
on our
out
hands
the
and knees.
fridge and cleaning
No.
underneath it, yeah.
Yeah, we had a client ask us to use a chainsaw to cut a tree down once, and we had to explain to them we probably wouldn't do that.
That's a little bit outside
Yeah,
of our
just a little bit.
expertise.
Just a little bit.
Yes. Okay, so when you hire people in, what are you looking for?
If I was going to put it in a nutshell, it would be this. What, by the time I'm done with the interview, now they've already had a phone interview, now they're an in-person interview, I think to myself this: am I comfortable sending this person to my mom? Because if I'm not comfortable with that, they're not hired. Now, part of that is background check, reference checking, all that stuff, that the due diligence that we have to do.
Okay, now explain that a little bit more. When somebody goes to apply for home care, there's a screening process, of course. So what is it that you look for outside? So you do the interview, you're comfortable with that, but technical things, do you, like a background check, a police check, what are you looking for in their backgrounds?
We're looking for anything that shows up in a background check.
Okay.
And we also do a driving record check, because
Which would be what?
well, any kind of, certainly theft,
Yeah,
right? Anything that has to do theft,
Yep.
like shoplifting,
Yep.
retail fraud, those
Yep.
are terms that you see. So if there's theft in their background, we don't hire. We just simply don't do that. So
I
obviously, any
understand
felony, they're out. There could be some minor things we may look at and say, after the interview, we might think about it, but generally speaking, if there's anything on their background, we do not hire them. Also, in the driving record check, we're looking for drinking while driving, impaired driving, because that might be an indication they have an alcohol or substance abuse problem.
Yeah.
But we do drug testing too, so
okay. Do you do random or just before hire?
we do both.
Okay. All right. So you also do an orientation. Now, this was really interesting in our conversation because, I am like you, putting somebody in a home where older adults are vulnerable. You want to have somebody who is trustworthy and to the best of your ability have been able to screen those people out.
Right.
So, you're talking about an orientation and, saying, if you find anything or if you find out they've stolen anything, you'll pursue them, blah, blah, to the highest extent of the law, and had a couple of people walk out on you.
Right.
And for me, when you left, I thought thumbs up to that because, this may not be the job for you, but certainly going into a job thinking you're going to be alone with a vulnerable senior, it's like prime for the picking, So I think weeding out those people, so not all companies do that. And I know you know that. And me being in home care, I know that too. So that's why it was important for me to have you on, because I think the same way that you do as far as home care goes.
I would say in a summary thing, our business attitude or our business way of looking at things, there are businesses out there that they have to make money. That's their critical thing. We have to make money, obviously, or we're out of business. But my philosophy about that is, if you do the right thing, don't worry about the money. That'll take care of itself. If you just do the right thing, always the other things follow. So that's just the way we do things.
I totally agree with you. Okay, so when you're dealing with older adults, some of them can be, I'm not going to say picky, but, so when they call in, when you ask, what's important, I know that you have probably men and women. Do you ever have somebody say, I don't want this or I don't want that? I don't want a man taking care of me. I don't care if they're a nurse or a CNA or whatever. I'm not comfortable with that. Are you able to respect those wishes?
I'll let Sharon answer that, but just a comment about that.
Yeah.
Male and female caregivers. We have one male caregiver and 67, 68 female caregivers.
That doesn't surprise me.
So my look at that is this, just being in business. If you want a male caregiver, I can talk you into a female caregiver. If you want a female caregiver, I'm not going to talk you into a male caregiver. So it's just, and you just don't have that many men that are
Caregivers.
attracted to that field.
You
So-
are absolutely right. More nurses now than ever, I'm glad
Sure.
to say, are male. But often men look at nurses and look at mothers and sisters, and they identify them as being in a caregiver role.
Right.
So normally they don't object to that
Correct.
for whatever reason.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you ever find people when you do an assessment, they have any kind of outrageous little things that they want, or are people pretty much mainstream?
I would say for the most part, they're mainstream. There are some people that have some preferences.
Yes.
But I just gently try to explain to them why, what their preference is going to do. It really narrows my pool,
Yes.
which makes it much more difficult to fill the hours that they need and the time slots that they need with the skill that they need. So I generally can help them see that no matter who I send, if their personalities don't mesh, I'll change that. But I promise them all the time that there's a lot of people in a lot of different shapes, colors, and sizes that care very, very much, and that they will be pleasantly surprised.
And knowing your staff, and then meeting a client,
Absolutely.
Knowing things just click. I know
Right.
that you go, you already have somebody in
that
mind.
has
This is
happened,
going to
yeah.
work really well.
Yes.
And probably rarely you're wrong. Very rarely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
we actually have a gentleman, and I knew right from the moment we had been talking for 15 minutes who I wanted.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure she was available. She became available. She got him, and he will tell you she has changed his life.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see, and it's just the heart. So I always tell people, I can teach you skill. I can't teach the heart. So when we find somebody with the heart, we hold on to them. So.
I worked privately when I was in college for a family who approached me, please, please, please.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. So, but anyway, I don't advocate for that, okay, for lots of reasons. I was in college, and it happened to fit with me, but there's a reason why hiring privately is not a good idea.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, right off the top, I would say the family has to be very careful. The federal government does not like you hiring people and not paying their Social Security and their taxes. So whether you're ever going to get caught, that's another issue. But I think if people honestly look at that, they don't really want to be involved in that. Most people.
No, and when I was working, I was in college, and it was like babysitting,
Exactly.
or mowing a lawn, or cleaning somebody's house, or I don't know anybody who has their housekeeper on a payroll, okay?
Right.
Oh, so, for me, but also the thing is if somebody is injured in your home, and this is what I tell seniors, you have to be very careful
That's right.
because they're in your home. So
Right.
go ahead. And
So-
unemployment and all those other
Yeah,
things.
so you got workers' comp. If
Yep.
you got to worry about if somebody gets injured and the state finds out about that, they're not going to be happy. I would say that just having somebody in the home that you don't know and you probably haven't done a background check is very dangerous, just
Yes.
from my background. So for us, looking at that, if I'm a family member and I'm hiring somebody for my mom, the first thing I got to think about is, what if the caregiver calls in sick? And I've got to go to work. Now, if you have an agency, they're going to manage that. They're going to
right.
fulfill that. Even if it's a last-minute call-off, our staff within the office will go.
Right.
Because that's one of the reasons I hire the people I do in my office. So in case we have an emergency like that, we always have somebody that will go. So you have that, how do you manage it? Social Security taxes, workers' comp, insurance issues, all those things. I don't think most families want to deal with that.
Right. And they don't think about that either.
Right.
All they think about is somebody coming in and doing what they need to do. They
Right.
don't think about all of those other things and what happens if they get injured in my home.
Right.
And that could be a very costly mistake for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So anyway, okay, so when you interview people, do they go through a training process with you, the aides? And what exactly do you go over during that training?
Okay, so our orientation itself is kind of lengthy. It can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on questions and how much detail we feel we need to give. If they have a lot of experience and they're nodding their head and they're answering my question before I even, or answering the saying my words before I even finish, I know I'm pretty good there. But if they just kind of have sometimes I feel like I have to give more information just to make sure we're really clear on what this regulation is. But you mentioned, and that has happened many times, where I've gone over what we do. supervisory visits. We'll pop in and check on you and see how you're doing, if you're, to make sure everything's going well with the client.
Now, are those surprise visits?
Those are absolutely surprise visits. And I let the families know that we do supervisory visits because they don't want to be surprised, but the caregiver doesn't know. And so once we go over all the rules and regulations, like you said, we have had people get up in the middle of orientation and walk out. And I think, you know what, thank you for saving me the time and trouble, because that's not what
down the road
absolutely
might not
absolutely
be good.
Yeah. So we do the orientation, then from there they do a field training, which they are out with at a client's home with our current caregiver that is a trainer. And we actually changed over a couple years ago, and instead of having them just watch, we actually have them do
hands-on.
Yes. So I tell them, I want you to read the care plan. I want you to show my caregiver how you implement a care plan, how you engage a client, how much you can keep them involved in the conversation, how much you can put them at ease, how much initiative you have. If there's something on the floor, I tell my caregivers, if there's something on the floor and she doesn't pick it up, I need to know that. Because are you gonna expect an elderly person with a walker to pick that up later and possibly fall? So I need them to think like someone who runs a house. When you walk through your house, you see everything that needs to be done. So I need them to have those kind of eyes, rather than just, this is what they said I have to do. I've done it. I can sit down now. So we really want people who
are willing to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
That whole field training thing,
yeah,
that came from police work. So with the department I work for, I started the field training program in that police department. I was the first, what they call an FTO, field training officer.
Right.
And so I thought that was such a great idea. Why don't we bring it into home care?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's what we did. So they're actually out in the field working. So we already have eyes on them. We already know how they're going to react in different situations. So, so I just thought it was a great idea, and it's worked out really good for us.
So how do you handle, how do you get feedback from your clients? Because I know if you ask them and the caregiver's right there, they may be hesitant. How do you know if somebody's having an issue or if they have a complaint? How do you know that, and how do you go about resolving those things?
So I'll let Sharon answer this too, but I would say that we do supervisory visits that Sharon talked about. Mm-hmm. We also do, after about a week, we do what I call a quality call, quality care call. Somebody from the office will call and just talk to the person that's being taken care of, and just see to get a feel where that's at. The other big thing we do, which a lot of agencies don't do, is we hire a third-party company to do surveys for us. So they do random surveys of our clients and our caregivers to see if they're happy, see if the service is being done correctly. And the last 3 years we've won awards from that company because we have such good responses for that. Now, we're not perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
No, we're not perfect.
Right.
And we do have issues.
Yes.
Because, and I try to tell families this,
every company has issues.
So we have all these humans.
Yes.
You got the office staff, you got the people in the family, and you have the caregivers, all this trying to make this work. And some things are just not going to work sometimes. But I think where we're different is when we see a problem, we fix it really fast. We want to be on top of it real quick. So
that alleviates a snowball type effect.
Right.
You nip it in the bud.
exactly.
Yep.
We don't like that stuff to fester.
Right. No, it only gets worse.
It only gets worse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I know that people, like you said, having somebody in their home, it does help being a person on person, and when they meet, the caregiver. I know that it's not possible all the time putting the same person in there, but is that something that you really try to do, is
Absolutely.
keep that familiarity between the caregiver and the
Right.
and the client?
So what I tell, this is how I explain to families. I very rarely try to put one person, because what happens is if mom really loves Mary and Mary goes on vacation, I tell the family, you're going to have to take a vacation when Mary's ready, because mom's not going to want anybody else. But if I put two people in there, it's no longer Mary, it's my angel. So my angels are really great, and my angels and my angels. So I can either move the other angel over sometimes I can't, and I can put a third. But if I put a third, the two other angels were good, so that third one's probably going to be good too. So they realize, that is a really good policy. Now, I don't have a revolving door, though. So let's say somebody even has 4 days. They may have two caregivers, but those same two caregivers come week after week at the same schedule.
Right.
So that they have continuity, but they also still get a little bit of variety. And so you could get tired of the same personality all the time, no matter how fun they are. So,
You know, it's funny because when I was doing caregiving, that's the issue that I had. There were a couple of other caregivers, but when I hired in with them, I said, you know, I'm a camp director. I leave all summer. I cannot do this June, July, and August. And when I come back, it's like, oh, my mother missed you. And so I get it. They didn't want me to leave, but they knew when I said I would do it that was a stipulation.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing, because I think even with 3 people, and then if something happens with one, my daughter's sick or I'm sick, you have somebody else, and it's not a stranger coming in, it's the other person. And I think that really in the long run works out much more favorably.
Right. The other thing we try to do too is if we do have a new caregiver going to a client that is somewhat skittish about new people, we try to have somebody from the office go and introduce them. I try because I'm usually the person that they've met already. But sometimes if they've been a client for a while and they've talked with our scheduler, or they've talked with Christy on the phone multiple times, that voice is familiar. So they'll go and just say, you know, I talk to you all the time. Just wanted to let you introduce her to you. And we just stay for a few minutes, make sure they're comfortable, and then we can go back to the office. But it really helps them to not be as nervous if there's a new person coming into their home again, even if they've been with us for months.
Now, does your company have a minimum? Like a lot of home care companies have a minimum.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Honestly, when you think about everything that we can do, the minimum doesn't seem like it's that much. It's just 2 days a week with at least a 4-hour block each visit. And when I say it's hard to get a caregiver to be consistent with you, if I'm only having them if they drive all the way to your house for 2 hours,
if they live around the block, it's one thing. If they live 20 miles away, it's another thing.
In a perfect world, I'd have somebody that lives within 2 minutes of you, but it's not. So
it's all about communication.
Sure.
Setting an
If you just tell people, no, we don't do 2 hours. But if you say, the reason we don't do 2 hours is because you're going to have a revolving door in there, because caregivers don't want to go someplace for 2 hours.
Right.
They get it. So I got to just let them know. And that's what I think we're really good at, is just letting people know this is how it is. This is how it works.
And not only that, when they say, okay, I only need this, but in that 4-hour block, you can also have the vacuuming done, start a look. So it's not like you can't fill that. I understand not wanting to pay 4 hours if all I need is for somebody to help me get out of bed, get changed, and brush my teeth and comb my hair, but that's not all that needs to be done. So once they understand, but some companies, that's all they do. And like you said, that's a huge thing. When you say you can do this, 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 and this, well, yeah, I could use that. So that does help too. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I also, I think the family, some people are not able to help, other people are. And I just think home care is a perfect solution to the problem. I know that it can seem expensive, but at the same time, if you're getting what your money's worth and you select a good company, it's well worth the family arguments, who's going to do this, and often people, especially the seniors, have sticker shock. I often say, some things they don't need to know if it's going to cause that much of a problem.
I had a friend of mine say, if price was the only consideration, there would be no such thing as a Andiamo's or a Nordstrom's, or we'd all go to McDonald's, we'd all go to Walmart. But some people want a little
quality.
Yeah, quality. So
makes a difference.
Yeah, it does.
Well, thank you so much, John and Sharon, for being with us today. And if anybody has any questions, we'll put your information up for them to call, and hopefully we'll have you on the show again. And it was delightful, and I hope we've brought some information to our viewers, and it's always a good thing.
Just one thing is if they have any question at all about senior stuff, call us. We have a lot of resources. You don't have to necessarily get us to come into your house, or if you just have a question, we'd be glad to answer for that. Answer those questions. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, friends in the viewing audience, for being with us today.